In the gray, rain-lashed outskirts of Thean, in a crumbling chawl forgotten by progress, the overwhelming stench of rot began to seep from a locked room on the second floor. The building, once bustling with low-income families, had become a ghost shell, home now to gamblers, transients, and the silences no one dared disturb. It was in this decaying structure that the police broke into Flat 2B after neighbors complained for days. Inside, the lights were dead, the curtains torn, and in the center of the room sat a blue plastic drum, half sunk in a circle of black salt and ash. Symbols in red, some smeared like finger-painted blood, decorated the floor and walls. The drum was sealed with 7 strips of wax and cloth. The stench was unbearable. But when the lid was pried off, it revealed a horror too grotesque to forget. A human body, half dissolved in acid, with ears plugged with wax and the tongue violently ripped out. The corpse was contorted unnaturally, as if it had died mid-scream. The woman who had rented the flat months earlier under the name Savita Naik was nowhere to be found. She had paid in cash, offered no identification, and left no digital footprint. But the neighbors remembered her, quiet, intense, dressed always in black, and constantly burning incense, camphor, and ghee lamps that were never allowed to extinguish. One neighbor, a young girl named Tanuja, claimed she'd often seen Savita talking to the wall at night, whispering as if someone were listening. No one believed her then. Crime reporter Myra De Cruz was the first to sense that the case was more than a typical murder. Once a rising star in investigative journalism, Myra had been ostracized for a piece on tantric exploitation that ended with 2 ritual deaths she failed to prevent. Now she worked independently, chasing the darkness others fled. The blue drum case, as it came to be called, gripped her gut. There was something wrong, something beyond murder, something ancient lingering in that flat. When Myra returned to the flat at night, guided only by a flickering torch and her recorder, she felt it. The static in the air, the hum beneath the floor, and the shadows that moved even when she stood still. Underneath the rotten bed frame, she found a burnt, half-destroyed manuscript wrapped in red cloth and human hair. What was legible chilled her. It was a tantric text, written in a blend of Sanskrit, Urdu, and Marathi, dedicated to the worship and summoning of Karnapishachini. Unlike the commonly known spirits in Hindu lore, Karnapishachini was not a ghost of the dead. She was something far older, a demoness who could whisper the hidden truths of the universe directly into a person's ear, provided they completed her siddhi. The ritual was complex, harrowing, and forbidden for centuries. To achieve the siddhi, one had to meditate in complete silence for 41 nights beside a cremation pyre, feeding the fire only with bones of suicides and hair of the unburied. On the 42nd night, the spirit of Karnapishachini would appear, not as a vision, but as a whisper. First in the left ear, then the right. The practitioner was to never reply, never ask for more. For every truth she gave, a piece of the soul was taken. And if the Siddhak, the practitioner, asked her to repeat herself 3 times, she would crawl into their skull through the ear and remain forever. Karnapishachini was described as beautiful only in silhouette. Her real face was forbidden to gaze upon. She was always listening, drawn to pain, betrayal, and the desire for vengeance. Her mouth was sealed by fire. Her tongue was black ash. Her body was formed from the regrets of those who died unheard. But her power was vast. She could reveal secrets, the location of lost things, the crimes of others, even the time of one's death. But knowledge comes at a price, and those who sought her often went mad from her whispers. The manuscript ended with a warning in bold blood-red ink. She whispers once for truth, twice for lies, thrice for possession. Myra's investigation led her to Savita's past. Her real name was not Savita Naik. She had once been Rekha Kambal, a schoolteacher in Nashik, whose life had been destroyed when private photos of her were leaked online by a man named Sundar Kambal. Ironically, no relation. Sundar, a known manipulator of women, had seduced, blackmailed, and emotionally crushed Rekha, just as he had done to at least 4 others, but none of the other women survived. One committed suicide. One went missing. One was institutionalized. Rekha survived, but she changed. Her neighbors in Nashik said she began visiting cremation grounds at night, dressing in widow's white, collecting strange items, dirt from unmarked graves, wax from melted funeral candles, and menstrual cloth buried beneath banyan trees. It was her grandmother, an old tantric woman from Akola, who once practiced forbidden rites before vanishing into the Dandakaranya forests, who had taught her the names of spirits like Karnapishachini. Her grandmother's notes, preserved in a hidden chest, were fused with her own grief into a plan, not just for revenge, but for power. Rekha performed the siddhi in secret, cutting off ties with society, letting her pain and hatred ferment into fuel for invocation. 41 nights of silence and ritual in the cremation grounds of Nashik, speaking to no one, living on food offered to the dead. On the final night, she offered her own severed earlobe, dipped in ghee, to the flames. From that day onward, she began to hear Karnapishachini. The spirit whispered to her the passwords of Sundar's private email accounts, the names of his victims, his upcoming plans, the location of his secret cash hoards, and finally, his own fears. Rekha changed her name, her face, her life. She became Savita Naik and lured Sundar into her trap. Not with force, but through manipulation, seduction, and fear. She told him she had a secret that could make them rich. He followed her willingly to the flat. What happened next was never recorded in full, but from bloodstains, diary scraps, and the drum itself, a disturbing picture emerged. Sundar was drugged. His ears were filled with wax to silence him. His tongue was cut and placed inside a small brass bowl inscribed with Karnapishachini's yantra. He was still alive when acid was poured in. The blue drum, made of plastic but coated with sacred ash and mirror fragments, was not meant just to store the body. It was a container, part prison, part offering, part shrine. A modern yantra in which the whispering spirit would reside. But something went wrong. Karnapishachini grew stronger. She did not want just Sundar. She wanted more mouths, more ears. She began whispering to the neighbors through walls, to children in their sleep, to dogs that barked at night, with blood streaming from their ears. As Myra delved deeper, her own dreams began to change. She heard whispers at night, secrets from her past, the voice of her dead sister calling her name, the memory of a lover who had lied, things no one could know. Then she saw her own ear bleeding. The spirit had found her. Myra sought out the last living tantric who had once dealt with Karnapishachini. His name was Brahmananda Gori, a 90-year-old hermit who lived near the Vaitarna River. His face permanently scarred by burns he claimed were given by the spirit when he tried to silence her. He told Myra there was no escape. Once the whisper begins, it must be fed. If you ignore her, you will go deaf. If you answer her, you will go mad. If you repeat her words, she will crawl into, oh soul. There was only one way to stop her. Sacrifice your hearing forever, or trap her inside a sacred vessel with the ashes of her last victim and the hair of the woman who summoned her. Myra returned to the flat with Brahmanand. They began the final ritual. But Karnapishachini was no longer a whisper. She was a scream now. Walls cracked, shadows bled. The blue drum trembled like a living organ. As Myra poured the victim's ashes and sealed the lid with funeral wax, the voice spoke one final time, not to warn, not to beg, but to laugh. Myra fell unconscious. Days later, the flat was empty again. Myra was never found. Only her voice remained, recorded unintentionally on her final podcast. In the audio, she is heard saying, "Let me tell you a secret, just once." Then a wet whisper follows. Listeners reported bleeding ears. Some went mad. The episode was taken down, but copies leaked. In a warehouse in Kalyan, another blue drum was found, sealed, untouched, humming softly. And the whisper, days turned into weeks, but the memory of the blue drum refused to fade. It had spread beyond Thane like a sickness, infecting slum whispers, police records, and even occultist forums online. People began exchanging stories of hearing voices when alone, of sudden deafness in one ear, of dreams in which a veiled woman sat behind them and whispered unspeakable things into their soul. Somewhere between the lines of superstition and truth, the presence of Karnapishachini had begun to root itself into collective fear. The investigation into the case had been formally closed by the Mumbai police. The file was marked solved, with a vague explanation that the woman named Savita Naik had murdered Sundar Campbell in revenge and then vanished. But among the lower-level officers, there was an unspoken pact. No one was to go near Flat 2B again. It was left sealed, with no renters, no buyers, just silence. Yet silence is the language of Karnapishachini, and within that silence, something continued to grow. Then came Inspector Vinod Suryavanshi. Vinod was a pragmatic man, middle-aged, logical, and known for solving cold cases. After hearing a hushed rumor from a retired constable who claimed to have heard whispers in his sleep ever since the drum was opened, Vinod reopened the files in secret. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he did believe in madness. And this case had left too many minds broken. Too many bodies disappeared. As he dove deeper, Vinod discovered more inconsistencies. Another missing girl, Meena Moore, from the same chawl, had vanished a week before the police entered the flat. Her family had not filed a report, believing she had run away. But her younger brother, only 7 years old, claimed he had seen her speaking to a mirror woman inside flat 2B. He described her with terrifying clarity: a long black veil, hands of ash, and teeth that grew each time she smiled. Vinod brought in an exorcist named Swami Vishwaraj, a controversial figure known for having cleansed a haunted police chowki in Aurangabad. Together, they entered flat 2B again, this time at night, with camera equipment, camphor, and copper yantras etched with protective mantras. What they found wasn't just a room, it was a temple to pain. The walls, stripped clean months ago, now had fresh symbols etched in soot. The black salt circle had reappeared on the floor, unbroken. And the drum they had taken to the forensic lab, was back. This time, it was open. Inside, there was no body, but instead, they found hundreds of strands of human hair, coiled like worms, and a severed tongue still wet. The tongue was identified as belonging to Meena Moore, yet no blood, no struggle, no fingerprints, just a note, written in lipstick across the wall. She whispers better through women. That night, Swami Vishwaraj began convulsing violently and bled from both ears. Before collapsing into unconsciousness, he screamed, "Don't answer! Don't let her speak through you!" He died 3 days later in JJ Hospital, his brain showing signs of auditory hallucination-induced hemorrhaging. His ears were charred from the inside out, as if something had entered them with burning breath. Vinod, now shaken but determined, began visiting occult scholars across the country. Puri, Kashi, and a blind tantric woman in Kalighat named Ma Aloka, who was once an initiate of the forbidden Shakti path. She spoke to him only at night, her face permanently turned away. She explained the truth behind Karnapishachini. She is not just a spirit. She is a Shabda Chaya, a shadow of sound, born from the echoes of women silenced unjustly for centuries. Every woman buried without a name, every scream ignored, every secret kept through violence. They become her. She has no body because she was never allowed to live. She has no face because no one ever saw her. But she has a voice, and once you hear it, it becomes yours. Ma Aloka gave Vinod a single tool, a black rudraksha, dipped in the oil of 108 cremations and wrapped in red thread. Keep it in your left ear at night. It may not stop her, but it may remind her you're listening with consent. That sometimes keeps her at bay. But Vinod had already begun to hear whispers. The voice started gently, his mother's lullaby, long forgotten. Then it spoke the name of his childhood friend who had died under mysterious circumstances. Then it whispered the names of corrupt officers in his own department. And finally, it spoke a single phrase that shattered him. Your daughter did not die in that accident. Vinod had lost his teenage daughter in a car crash 2 years ago. Her body was mangled, the accident unexplainable. But now, Karnapishachini was whispering that someone had made her crash, that it was no accident. Vinod became obsessed. He pulled out old reports, CCTV footage, autopsy files. Slowly, dreadfully, he realized the impossible. Someone had tampered with the car's brakes. A politician's son, who was stalking his daughter, had been seen near her hostel days earlier. Vinod had never known. But Karnapishachini had whispered the truth. That's how she spreads. Through trauma, through secrets, through the terrible craving to know. Vinod now had a choice: confront the man who had killed his daughter, or refuse to act and risk losing himself to the whispers. But even as he struggled, the pattern continued. Other women, maids, students, even a local news anchor, began hearing voices. Some became erratic, others disappeared. A nurse in a psychiatric ward gouged out her ears with a pen. Her blood wrote on the wall. She's crawling through the drums now. And then came the mass whispering. One morning, in 3 different Mumbai suburbs, Thane, Ghatkopar, and Malad, residents reported that around 3:33 a.m., a soft, slithering female voice had entered their dreams. It had no accent, no breath, just syllables that melted into bone-deep fear. Some spoke in their sleep, some cried, some died. Children were found in fetal positions, ears bleeding, chanting gibberish. No one could understand what the spirit wanted. It wasn't revenge anymore. It wasn't merely truth. Karnapishachini had tasted the fear of a city, and now she was feasting. Vinod, with his sanity slipping and his hearing decaying into static, received one final call. It was from a blocked number, a woman's voice, his daughter's voice, saying, "Come to the original drum." The final location led him to a forgotten house near the Vaitarna River, Savita Naik's ancestral home. There, hidden beneath floorboards, was the first drum, the one that started it all. It wasn't plastic. It was iron. Old, dented, and sealed with a lock made of braided hair and wax. The moment he touched it, his ears rang with thousands of screams, then a whisper that simply said, "You can know everything. You just have to give me your ears." And Vinod laughed, because he realized the horror wasn't in the spirit. The horror was in how much he wanted to say yes. That night, clouds hung low over the Vaitarna River, thick with monsoon damp, drowning out the cries of dogs and the rustle of trees. In the heart of that suffocating silence stood Inspector Vinod Suryavanshi, his ears filled with the dissonant hum of whispered truths and imagined screams. He stared at the iron drum, centuries old, painted in ash and blood now flaking away like diseased skin. His left hand trembled, clutching the key made of bone and thread, the one he found buried in the ruins of Savita's ancestral shrine beneath a stone marked with a woman's scorched face. The voice came again, softer this time, coaxing. "You know she was pregnant, don't you? The girl they silenced. the one they buried alive under your watch. Vinod staggered. He hadn't told anyone about that case. A tribal girl from Palghar, found dead with bruises and mud under her nails. The autopsy said she had been buried alone. His seniors hushed it up, said it would cause unrest. He had signed the report. I can give you her last memory, her heartbeat, her scream, the name she cried out before the dirt filled her mouth. The key clicked. As the drum creaked open, the temperature dropped instantly. The air thickened. The wind stopped. Inside, there was no corpse, only a mirror, not made of glass, but of polished black stone, obsidian, so dark it swallowed light. Vinod peered into it and saw not his reflection, but a line of women, mouths sealed by stitches, holding blue drums, all walking slowly toward him. Behind them in the darkness stood a towering shadow draped in veils of smoke and crimson thread, her face unseen, her eyes two bottomless pits glowing with the sorrow of centuries. Karnapishachini. Vinod screamed, but no sound came. The spirit had entered the space between his ears. What happened next is pieced together only from fragments, interviews, journal entries, and the whispers that began spreading through Mumbai in the weeks that followed. 3 days later, 19 drums appeared overnight across the city, one in a temple courtyard, another inside a train bathroom, several along the platforms of CST and Dadar, and one floating in a tank near the slums of Dharavi. Each drum was sealed, surrounded by salt and vermilion powder, and near each was found a pair of human ears wrapped in red cloth. The panic began quietly. Train commuters began covering their ears with cotton soaked in mustard oil. School children reported hearing a woman weeping in their dreams, crying their names and begging to be listened to. In Andheri, a young woman tore her own ear off with her bare hands after claiming a voice was teaching her to kill. Podcasts began reporting corrupted audio clips. YouTube horror vloggers who tried to investigate the drum woman myth began disappearing. One, a popular channel called Haunted India, live-streamed their visit to the Vaitarna house. The stream went silent exactly 27 minutes in. When police retrieved their equipment, the only thing left was a half-burned camera and a drum sealed with human teeth embedded in wax. The government responded with silence. Unofficially, they brought in a team of specialists, psychiatrists, forensic analysts, even a linguistic historian named Dr. Rajnish Mehta from Banaras Hindu University, who had once translated pre-Vedic texts related to sound entities. Dr. Mehta's notes, later leaked online, included this line: "She is no longer a whisper. She is now a resonance, an echo that seeks vessels." In an underground meeting at an abandoned INS facility off the coast of Alibag, a ritual was attempted. One final containment. A tantric named Agora Daya, descendant of the cremation ground sadhus of Tarapith, led it. The plan was to capture the sound of Karnapishachini into a Shunya Bindu yantra, a soundless void created through ancient mantras, silence, and specific frequencies played through hand-beaten copper drums and conch shells tuned to the shruti of grief. But she had already infected the ritual itself. Daya began to chant the mantras. The yantra pulsed, and then he stopped. He turned to the group and whispered, "Do you want to know what your mother said on her deathbed?" He slit his own throat with the sacrificial blade. Blood sprayed onto the yantra. The drum cracked. The mirror reappeared. It was no longer about revenge. Karnapishachini was no longer tied to a place or a person. She was a sentient memory, traveling through grief, guilt, and silence. Every woman silenced by society. Every child whose secrets were buried. Every scream swallowed for the sake of family honor. She lived in those silences, and the drums were no longer drums. They were containers of the unspoken. Now they appear in strange places, under beds, inside closets, in old village temples where no one goes. Once opened, they bring not a ghost, but a knowing, a whisper of what was hidden, what should never be known. Some people go mad. Some die. Some become her instruments. Vonod was never seen again. But months later, a beggar woman at CST station was arrested after pulling a blue drum across the platform, leaving behind a trail of soot and hair. When questioned, she simply said, "She speaks best when no one listens." And then she began whispering in 20 different voices. That night, 11 people committed suicide across Mumbai. Each left behind a note with a single phrase, "I just wanted to know."